So is 3D printing cheaper than injection molding? Yeah, we're going to talk about it today. So generally 3D printing is considered to be, in common knowledge, to be more expensive than injection molding. That is actually false, and I want to address that right up front. 3D printing generally breaks even with injection molding at about 250,000 parts, maybe 100,000. It depends on your project. But to know if it is cheaper than injection molding is really dependent upon your specific project and what your goals are. But we're going to talk about the cost attributed to each one of them so that you kind of know how to set up the question to see if it works in the context of what your project is. So within injection molding, you of course have the upfront cost of the mold, very often somewhere between $1,000 and $100,000 for the mold, depending on what you're making, how complex it is, how many pieces are in it. You may have to get a few molds to make all the pieces for your assembly. But then once you have that mold complete, the raw materials for making your pieces are very low. A small piece like this will cost less than 25 cents, probably less than a couple of cents. If you're making 10,000, 100,000, 1 million of them. It depends on the molder that you're working with. But very often you have a very high upfront cost for the mold, and then fairly low operational cost once you have that, unless your mold needs to be replaced at some point. However, something that is very often overlooked by designers when they create this is that once you have all those parts made, you then have to ship them and you have to store them. Both of those are not small costs. If you are shipping within, for instance, the continental US, shipping is quite expensive, and you'll be spending several $1,000s to move a truckload of your parts to your warehouse. Once those parts are at your warehouse, it's very expensive to store them because you have to pay rent for that warehouse. Or you might have them on some racks somewhere, but again, those are costs that are ongoing and exist to the very end of your business or the end of that product. So those are to be considered when you do injection molding. While it may have an upfront cost and then low per part cost, you have long-term carrying and transportation costs that go along with it. Now, 3D printing, production 3D printing. Again, production 3D printing can produce at the same volumes as injection molding. At Slant 3D, we produce thousands of pieces all the time for different clients, more cheaply than injection molding. The reason for that is because we don't have the mold cost up front. So a client is able to come in, just email us a design, and then we can produce 100 parts, 1,000 parts, 10,000 parts, 100,000 parts as they grow, and deliver them as they grow and as those parts sell. So they eliminate the high upfront cost of the mold, which is just gone. It's not even a factor in it anymore. The per part cost is generally higher than injection molding, generally because people are operating at lower volumes. If you're making 250,000 small parts, 3D printing can make them for the same per part cost as injection molding. There'll be some design considerations there and that kind of thing, so that's not universal, but it's absolutely possible, and it is a goal to shoot for if you design for the 3D printing process. And I recommend you look at our other videos where we discuss the different design attributes of 3D printing. But once the part is in production and 3D printing is producing it, you only have to take parts as you need them. You do not have to take 100,000, ship them across the country, store them in a warehouse, and then distribute the products. With 3D printing, you can produce 100 parts, keep those around on some shelves in a back room until you sell them all, then produce another 100 and another 100. And you can work a deal with your production supplier, like Slant 3D, so that we can either store your parts for you or ship them to you so that you get the volume benefit over time, and we are able to deliver them to you in smaller batches so that you eliminate the warehousing costs. But you can take this to a complete extreme. We do fulfillment services for a number of different clients, and a number of other 3D printing services do similar things. So you can just email the product over, get verification samples, but then just create a listing on your site, and when the order comes in, we print and ship that item for you. So you completely eliminate the shipping cost of getting it to your warehouse, you eliminate the warehouse, so you don't have that cost anymore, and you eliminate the mold up front. So basically all of the risk and all of the long-term risk is eliminated because you don't have the upfront cost of the mold, You don't have to hold a warehouse for 12 months while you sell all your product, and you don't have to ship your product to the warehouse. It's just customer makes an order, the product appears magically, and then is sent to them directly. That is the optimum way of doing it in a way that injection molding just cannot. Because if you buy that mold, you have to use it, and you have to make a bunch of pieces to make it pay for itself. So it depends on the context of your business. If you're going to sell 10 million parts tomorrow, probably want to go with an injection molding. If you have a more distributed fulfillment schedule where you're doing maybe 10, 20,000 parts a month, 3D printing is probably a better option because you eliminate all your ancillary costs. And then there's also just the long-term benefits again of when you want to change your product or make a product variation, you don't have to change your molds and do it all again. You just send a new digital file. So is 3D printing cheaper than injection molding? Sometimes. Depends on what your product is, and you need to make sure you're designing for your end process in mind. But just make sure that when you're doing the cost comparison that you consider the entire pipeline. You have the mold cost, the carrying cost, the warehousing, the shipping. A product is not done and not made until the customer has it in their hands. And if your manufacturing process can make that cheaper, then you might want to choose that one.